Britain has many ancient castles, hotels and inns, and each has a rich and occasional dark history. Many of these dramatic events left an imprint that repeat themselves over and over again like a movie. The following case is about an old manor in England that has left such a mark. Do you have a paranormal experience you'd like to share with our viewers? Record your story on your phone or write it down and email your video or written account to us at weirdworldstories@gmail.com. Pengethley Manor Hotel is located in Herefordshire in central England, and in 1996 American visitors by the name of Sue Ellen Wolfonder, Karen Stevens and their English friend Pat Cody were at the manor on August the 9th and 10th. They arrived late at night, around 11 p.m, after doing a tour of local landmarks. Even though it was late, Sue Ellen had trouble sleeping because of what she believed was a loud party next door, which was followed by heavy footsteps. The footsteps sounded like boots and it beat heavy, as if coming from a male. However, these footsteps were coming from the room above, and they continued to pace backwards and forwards as if troubled by something. Sue Ellen thought nothing of it, other than thinking some inconsiderate people were making a lot of noise at that time of night. It was not until breakfast the following morning where she began to realise that something odd had happened the previous evening. Her friend sat down at the table and asked her if she'd had a good night's sleep. She said no, she had not, and complained about the noisy guests in the room next door, followed by loud footsteps at 2 a.m. in the morning in the room above her. There was suddenly a silence. Then one of her friends who'd had a room close to her said they'd not heard any noise at all. And as they were close by, she should have heard the same commotion. Another of her friends was equally confused because they told her that they were in the room above hers and were not walking around at 2 a.m. in the morning. Although everyone was confused by Sue Ellen's story, they finished breakfast, left the manor to resume their tour. It was on the second night that Sue Ellen came to the conclusion that something was definitely not normal when the same noises from the night before repeated themselves from the room next door to the loud footsteps in the room above. The party sounds next door started at the exact time at 11 p.m, and it was as if somebody was playing the same tape and the sounds were exactly the same. Searching for a logical explanation, she decided to turn on the television and changed all of the channels to see if any of them replicated what she could hear in the room next door, but nothing she heard even remotely sounded the same. She then put her ear to the wall and could plainly hear what sounded like a loud party in full swing. She could clearly hear a man's voice that was very deep, along with several women's voices. But she could not make out any distinct words, just the sound of many voices and the man with the deep voice. The women had high-pitched voices and appeared to be in high spirits, as they would occasionally break into hysterical laughter. But this was the exact same pattern of noise at the exact same time as the night before. As she concentrated hard on the sounds, she could also hear what sounded like large pieces of furniture being dragged around the floor and the definite sound of chairs being scraped across the floor. All in all, it was the sound of one noisy raucous party going on. Sue Ellen felt without a doubt that something really weird was going on, because how can you have the exact same party 2 nights in a row with the exact same pattern of voices with the occasional burst of hysterical female laughter accompanied with all the same noise of a party? Like the previous night, she was tempted to bang on the wall, but for some reason felt reticent. Instead, she decided to ring reception and make a complaint. The man on reception could not understand why parties should be happening in that particular room, because it was presently occupied by an elderly gentleman who was there by himself. When she heard that, the hairs on the back of her arms stood up, and she felt a cold shudder. Sue Ellen later found that the receptionist went up to the room himself after she called him, but could hear no sound coming from the room. She then called her friends Karen and Pat in the room next door to ask whether they could hear the party sounds, but they told her they could hear nothing. While they were still on the phone, Karen asked Pat to enter the hallway and listen at the door, but she came back saying she'd heard nothing at all. But while Sue Ellen was still on the phone to Karen, the noise continued, and she could not understand how nobody could hear the loud party next door, as it was extremely loud. Sue Ellen was now scared and asked Karen and Pat to come to her room so they could hear it for themselves. Now this is where it gets extremely weird, because the moment Karen told her that they were coming into her room, the noise stopped immediately. It was as if someone had turned off a switch and the noise ceased. When they entered the room, they all sat on the bed and waited for around 20 minutes, but nothing happened. When they eventually left to go back to their room, Sue Ellen accompanied them, as she was afraid that the moment she was left by herself in the room, everything would start up again. Later, Sue Ellen wondered whether the room next door had at one time been a large parlour, and the party was just a recording from long ago that had imprinted itself in the room, and was in fact a residual haunting. A residual haunting is where a spectre repeats a loop of its past with no semblance of intelligence or consciousness. What concerned Sue Ellen was why was it only her that could hear it and nobody else? However, there'd been further weird events in the manor other than what Sue Ellen had experienced. Bengathley Manor Hotel is said to be haunted by a maid by the name of Harriet. Harriet was once a maid in the building when it was known as Manor House and was owned by the Simmons family in the late 1800s. It was in that period that there was a fire in the building and the maid died in the fire. From that moment on, Harriet was seen by many visitors who saw her presence at the bottom of their bed. Fortunately, they were not threatened by her presence and felt she was friendly. Although Sue Ellen's friends Karen Stevens and Pat Sushi had not experienced their friend's haunting, they had their own strange experience at the manor. After they had checked in and they were walking up the stairs, Pat felt someone brush past her, but as she looked around, found there'd been nobody close enough to touch her. It could not have been Karen, as she was nowhere near her at the time. At this stage, nobody was thinking about ghosts. Karen had a Polaroid camera with her at the time and decided to take photos of the stairs and landing, and when the photo was developed, she could see two unusual streaks on the photo. The following morning, Karen woke up at around 7 a.m. and just laid in bed for a while, just thinking about the day ahead. She could hear her friend Pat having a shower and moving around in the bathroom. She then saw a sudden movement near the window and glimpsed the transparent figure of a woman wearing some sort of uniform like a maid's outfit. The figure appeared to raise her arms as if she was opening the curtains. Karen was not frightened, and the ghostly-looking figure looked as though she had a right to be there. Karen said good morning, and the figure abruptly vanished. Could it be the ghostly maid called Harriet, whose job it was to open the curtains in the morning and then close them at night? Was it the same apparition that brushed past Pat in the stairway, and who Karen saw at the window? Or was this another residual haunting at the manor?